All right, this is 5.6 writing methods. Last class we finished up 5.4 and we went on to 5.5, completed 5.5. We could have started 5.6, but I just wanted to start fresh. This says it should take 90 minutes, so we really shouldn't complete this in this class period. So I'm going to go through pretty slowly and make sure we're talking about this. We've already wrote methods before, but now we're going to dive deeper into that. So you might look at the title and be like, I know what a method is, and you just skip it. Let's pay attention to some of these details that we'll be adding on to what we already know. Okay. It starts off by saying, up until this unit, you wrote all your code in the main method. But now we are using lots of methods. Why have multiple methods instead of just one? Procedural abstraction allows us to name a block of code as a method and call it whenever we need it, abstracting away the detail of how it works. Now remember that abstraction is the removal of detail. That I know when I flip my lights on and off, I don't need to know how it works. All I need to know is what the light switch does. In the same way that earlier on in Intro to Computer Science and AP Computer Science Principles, some of the topics and things we went through, I said, hey, some of the details are abstracted. Just realize that this is what you're using right now. Here's what we're doing and how to use this. But if we want to tap into the why and dig deeper, that's going to take additional time. So with that, now we're diving deeper into the why. So you might know what methods are, but why are we using them? Right? Why wouldn't we just, says why, this question was actually asked before during AP Computer Science Principles last year. It says, why would we have multiple methods, right? Why are we doing this? So it's beyond the scope of this class. I'll let you know later. And now we're at that point. Okay, so abstraction is the removal of details. In the same way that if you ever used a block-based programming language like Scratch or Thunkable or MIT App Inventor, that all the details of the code were removed. They tried to make it as easy as possible so you could get excited about it and use it and then move on from there, right? You're not meant to stay with Scratch your entire life. Maybe you do, and maybe you somehow like make Scratch something that you like teach, and that be a way to make a career out of it. But even then, there's a certain point where you want to learn more. If we're doing the same thing over and over again, the thing about technology is you have to be a lifelong learner and want to learn more. So some of these things, you eventually get to a point you're like, why have I been doing this thing this way for 5 years? Right? It might not take 5 years, but you wonder, why am I doing this? And you should ask why. It says, this serves to organize our code by function and reduce its complexity and reduce the repetition of code. Okay, I don't like to have to repeat myself when I'm talking, right? Even it pains me sometimes. I remember at one point, I taught 4 sections of the same class. I taught 4 sections of AP Computer Science Principles, right? So I have to repeat myself 4 times every single day, right? There are 43-minute classes. I saw every class every single day, and I repeated myself 4 times. And there are some teachers that teach the same class 5 times a day, all right? Can you imagine repeating yourself over and over and over and over and over again? Sometimes you forget what you said, and by the last time you say it, it's like a script, and it doesn't even feel like you're actually there, right? Then after you teach it for years, right, it just becomes something that maybe you don't really, I guess, want to continue to repeat yourself. But at the same time, repetition is important in learning. Repetition is important in memorization. And a lot of this you will repeat over and over and over again in your learning process, but you don't want to repeat the same code over and over and over again, right? If you want things to be done efficiently and timely, you want to reduce the complexity and reduce the repetition of code. Thus why we're learning about classes and methods. In addition, it helps with debugging and maintenance, since changes to the block of code only needs to happen in one place. Okay, if you have to go back and edit code, that you wrote a long time ago, and let's say you're upgrading to a new version, right? Versioning is really important. Creating different versions of whatever software or game you're making, right? That if you have to go back and change a ton of code every single time that you go back to make updates, it's going to become annoying. So do we want to find ways to make it as easy as possible to edit in the future? Your code might work, but is it efficient? And we're going to talk about efficiency. Okay. Here are some of the main reasons to use multiple methods in your program. One is organization and reducing complexity. Okay, you're able to organize your program into small sections of code by function to reduce its complexity. In APCSP, a method in the sense of a Java method. In APCSP, we use Python. Python uses the word function. Remember how we wrote DEF and then the function name, right? Why did we write all those functions? People asked me that. Why do we need functions? I said that's beyond the scope of the class, right? I gave them a short little answer. But these are, so when you hear like, why are we using methods? Think back to Python 2. Why did we use functions, right? We want to reduce the complexity of the program, break it up into small sections of code. It says divide a problem into sub-problems to solve it a piece at a time. That's called decomposition. I love breaking things down into smaller bite-sized pieces. Okay, that's the first reason. The second reason could be to reuse code. We don't want to repeat the same code in our program over and over and over again. We can reuse code by putting it in a method and calling it whenever needed. I remember the first time I realized I needed a procedure, is what they're called in Scratch, right? Procedure, I believe. I think so. I remember the first time I realized I needed one, and I ended up, like, after creating my first procedure, fell in love and was like, this is just going to save me a ton of time, right? So by writing methods, we're able to save time when it comes to reusing code. Another is the maintainability and debugging. Okay, we mentioned this already, but it's a lot easier to go back in your code and only edit a small portion of it rather than like just having to rewrite your entire code all over again. Many people I know that I've taught, they've worked on something in one of my classes and created something, and then years later it repiqued their interest and they went back to it and realized they had to change the entire thing, all their code, because they didn't know what they did before, that they didn't use functions or methods, and that they wanted to make changes to it and realized it would take a ton of time. And that can be discouraging, and we don't want to discourage people from writing code. So it says, click on all the lines that are completely identical and repeated. We talked about this in APCSP when we went through songs and we tried, we talked about, compression. Click on the lines that are completely identical. I guess those two and these two. This old man, he played 1, played 2, right? You could repeat, instead of rewriting that over and over, you could put a variable there. Is this what they want? Let's see. Yeah, I guess so. Right, so you could call this like chorus and just run that function chorus rather than have to type that out every single time. Or like, let's say this is 100 lines long or thousands of lines long. And you're like, oh, I want to edit that. I realized I made a spelling mistake when I copy and pasted it. Now I have to go back in every single instance instead of creating a function or creating a method and then calling that method. Did you find some repeated lines? Yes. You may have noticed that the chorus is repeated with this. Here are 3 steps to creating and calling a method. Okay. First, it says class name, object name is assigned new class name. Then, yeah, these are very general ways, but you would create the method, write the code that you would like printed, and then you call the method later on. So that way, this is the call right here. Kind of out of order. I'd rather write it first and then call it than call it and then write it. That's just me. For example, you could put this as your chorus, right? So then you could just call chorus. Okay. So the class is called song. Here's your method called chorus, and it prints these things out. So went ahead and printed the chorus there. So it says, can you replace these 2 lines of code? Yep, I can. So you can take out all this code, right, and simplify it by writing my song. I'm going to copy it. mysong.chorus and paste it. Just going to line that up to make it look nice. So I took out those lines of code below. I could have commented them out, but I just took them out completely. This is what your code looks like. I just copied this line and put it down there. I run it. And it passed. Right, so it plays the song. Have no idea what any of that means. In terms of the song, I don't know, like this old man, he played knick-knack on my thumb. Anyway, 5.61 parameters. You may have noticed more repetition in the song above. There was, as I mentioned, there's repetition. This old man, he played knick-knack on my, and then, so really, this is repeated, and all the way up to this is repeated, right? So can we call a method or write a method that does that, right? We can make even more powerful methods by giving them parameters for data they need to do their job, like this, right? This old man, he played, and then whatever the number is. Played knick-knack on my rhyme. Okay, it says, it prints the chorus methods. You see the code. Can you add verse 3 with the rhyme knee? Can you add 4 with the rhyme door? How many verses do you know? I don't know any of these. All right, so let's see. So I'll say, check this out. I have my song class. I have this verse method that is being passed in parameters, number and rhyme. And whatever you pass into here, when the function's called or when the method's called, it goes ahead and prints out whatever number was passed in there, whatever rhyme was passed in there. So let's look at our main method and let's follow along. First, I create my song. It's an object of the song class. Okay. So I'm going to call my song.verse. It finds the verse method and passes the argument 1 and thumb to it. So it goes into my song, which is an instance or an object of the song class. Okay. It finds verse, and it passed in 1 and it passed in thumb. So it then replaces, it prints out, he played 1 and then thumb, and it prints that out for you. Okay, and then chorus. So all this is being done inside the My Song class. So let's do exactly that. Check this out. I'm going to be lazy. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste it, and I'm going to do it one more time. Okay, 1, 2. This should be 3. This should be 4. And 3, they said ni. What did they say was 4? Door. Well, that is not how you spell it. Door. Is there a 5? Or is it 5? 5. Hive? I don't know. Check it out. I saw a video of this guy climbing up to the top of this tree and like getting honey from a beehive. And he like had smoke and was like knocking out all the bees with the smoke. He was like 100 feet up in the air getting honey. I couldn't do that. All right. Anyway, got it. Completed, well done. But you see the purpose of this, right? It just saves so much time writing code. I don't have to repeat stuff over and over and over again, right? It says when you create your own method, the variables you define for it in the method header are called formal parameters. Okay. When you call the method do its job, you give or pass in arguments or actual parameters. Okay, we've already talked about that in previous classes. When a method is called, the right method definition is found by checking the method signature or header at the top of the method definition. I feel like this part was written by someone that didn't read, unless it's just like repeating everything for us, but we've already gone through all of this before. It says, when a method is called, the right method definition is found by checking the method signature or the header at the top of the method definition to match the method name, the number of arguments, the data types for the arguments, and the return type. Okay, so all this has to match up, right? When we called, when we called the verse method, we passed in it 2 arguments. This one was 1. If this is passed in as the first parameter here, if 1 was written as an integer, just the number 1, right? And this says type string, then you're getting an error in your code. They have to match up. Okay, notice string, 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 string. In Python, did we need to tell the function what was being passed in, the data type? We did not. Okay. In Python, we did not need that. In Java, we do. Okay. It's a way to double check and make sure everything you're adding in is correct. Right. Same with line 2, right? Or verse 2. Passing in 2, it's a string. If I would have typed in just the number 2 with no parentheses or no quotation marks, I'd get an error. Say, hey, you passed in an int. I'm expecting a string. Okay. It says Java uses call by value when it passes arguments to methods. This means that a copy of the value in the argument is saved in the parameter variable. If the parameter variable changes its value inside the method, the original value outside the method is not changed. If you pass an argument that holds a reference to an object, like a string or person or turtle object, a copy of this reference is passed in and saved in the parameter variable. The formal parameter and the actual parameter are then aliases, both referring to the same object. Java was designed this way to avoid copying large objects from method to method. Remember when we discussed reference aliases with turtle objects. So this is an example here, right? So remember we created turtles. Let's say this turtle's name is Juan. This one's name is Mia. Okay. We then were able to I guess, say if I created friend and assigned it Mia, it would be a copy. So just another alias of what you could call Mia, right? So that we're not copying things over and over and over again. Advanced topics warning. Reading through it, see if it's needed. I'm going to read it. Advanced topics warning. Although string objects are not mutable, which means you can't change the string, the classes that you create will have mutable objects. If the reference parameter is for a mutable object, the method could change the actual object. However, it is good programming practice to not modify mutable objects that are passed as parameters unless required in the specification. Methods can even access the private data and methods of a parameter that is referenced to an object if the parameter is the same type as the methods enclosing class. Okay, well, like I said, a lot of this is just, they're just diving even deeper than you need in this class, but just saying, hey, look, if you're interested, these are some advanced topics. Note that strings are immutable objects, so they cannot be changed by the method. Only a new changed copy of them can be made. Methods can also return values of any type back to the calling method. The calling method should do something with this return value, like printing it or assigning it to a variable. It says try the problems below to practice with a string method. Okay. So let's just wrap our head around this. First, it says, here's some code. Whenever we read through like a bunch and there's not a lot of like code writing, like, look, we just started here and we read through all of this. And although we had some visuals, it's good then to go to the code and look at it. So here's where we go to the code. It says, run the following program, which contains a method called findLetter that takes a letter and a text as parameters and uses a loop to see if that letter is in the text and returns true if it is and false otherwise. Okay, so it looks through this text. It looks for a letter, let's say letter V. If there's a letter V in there, then it tells me if there is. It responds either true or false. It says set the variables. I guess it says run it first. So I'll run it. Okay. I have this class called string find. Inside of this, I have this findLetter method, and the output of it is Boolean. I'm being passed in a string, which is the letter, and a string, which is the text that it sorts through. I've created a called flag, right? Basically to lift a flag and say this is true. It doesn't have to be named flag. It can be named whatever you want. They chose flag. We have a for loop that goes through. We've talked about for loops. We initialize it, and then we specify how long it's going through, which is all the way through. And then we add 1 to it each time. It says if text.substring I to the next letter, it goes through. Okay, it looks at each. It ignores the case, it says. If this variable is inside, it equals whatever text letter we're looking at, then it turns the flag to true. Okay, it'll go through every single letter in the message first. Notice that it won't then change it to false. It only changes it to true once. Then at the very end, it returns true or false. When this main method is run, we create a new instance or object from the string find class. And this is called test. We have a message, which is apples and oranges, and it looks for a lowercase p. And we print out, does apples and oranges contain a p? Question mark. We then run the findLetter method. It passes in p and it passes in apples and oranges. We find the find letter method. P is my letter, apples and oranges. It looks through, is capital A. It starts at 0, so it looks at the capital A. Is capital A lowercase p? No, it's not. So then it moves to the next letter. Is lowercase p lowercase p? Yes, so it turns the flag to true, but then keeps going. Okay, P again, true. And it keeps going through, but all we need is one true. It will go all the way through apples and oranges, but the flag remains true. There's nothing in here that then takes the flag away. And then once it's done looking through all the letters, it returns the true or false value. Okay, it will print out true or false at the end. Okay, does apples and oranges contain a P? True. So what does it want me to do? It says set the variable's letter and message to new values in the main method and run it again to find a different letter. Okay, so if I go to my main method, I'll look for A. Maybe instead of apples and oranges, I'll change it to apples and bananas. Okay, so I changed the message, I changed the letter, then changed the code in the find letter method to return how many times it finds this in a new variable called count. Okay. So I can say something like int count, and every single time that it does equal that, I could say count, add 1 to it. Try that. Let's run it. Compiling and running your code now. Any day now. Error, a server error occurred. Of course it did. All right, let's try again. Count has not been initialized. So if I want to maybe say like count is assigned 0, maybe that's what I needed. Assign count to 0. Oh, so I guess it didn't want me to change apples and oranges. It wants me to create a new one. I'm going to change apples and oranges, I change it to apples and bananas, but then I just put it back to the way it was, to apples and oranges. It says change. All right, whatever. So I'll go through. Find letter S, test strings. So I guess it just wants me to do it all over again. Like reassign. Set the variables letter and message to new values in the main method. I did that. But now it's saying it wants apples and oranges again. So this is what I had, because it told me to change it. We did what it asked us to do. Okay. So we changed apples and bananas. We got A. We'll look at our code right here. The result, don't worry about the result down here. Oh, I got to print the count. That's right. So maybe the last thing I got to do is print the count. How would the return type change? Return flag. Usually, so I don't like the way this is done because typically we want the method to only return one thing. Okay, we don't want the method to return two separate things. So I'm not necessarily a fan of the way that this is written. I don't want it to return a flag and the count. A method should do only one thing. What did they? I could write a getter, but I don't want to do that. We're just going to skip I don't like the way this is written. I don't want to confuse you guys. So I'm going to go backwards here, right? If we did put a count, right? If we put a count here, I could say count plus equals 1, right? But what happens is when you return something from that method, we should get in the habit of only returning one thing from a method. Because if we wanted to return something else, we could just write another method. That's the beauty of it. So I don't know why they're trying to condense this and combine this into one. I don't like this. So I'm going to skip through it. If you really want to sit down and you want to write that out both ways, be my guest, but I don't think that's a good practice. And I know for sure on the AP Computer Science A exam, they don't want you to do that. So I don't know why it's practicing something that it doesn't want you to do. All right, 562, programming challenge, song with parameters. The ants go marching one by one. The ants go marching one by one. The ants go marching one by one, right? That's annoying after a while. It says, click on the words or phrases that are different in each verse. One by one. They all go marching down to the ground. 2 by 2, 2 by 2, 2 by 2, tie a shoe. 3 by 3, 3 by 3, 3 by 3, climb a tree. Everything else is the same, right? An active code window, create a method or methods that take parameters to print out a verse. The methods should be abstract enough to work for all three verses. Okay. So we have our main method, create method or methods. So there's our main method. If we want to write a, let's just say, create at least one method called verse that takes two parameters. Okay, so I'll say, let me see how we did this before. Up here, when we did our song, we wrote, yeah, so I'll do it that way too, just so that way I'm following what it asks me to do. I'll say public void verse, and it will accept two parameters. The two parameters, one's going to be a string And we'll call that number. And the second one will be the run. Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to say system dot out dot println, and we'll say I'm going to copy this line so that way I'm not spelling anything wrong. The ants go marching blank by blank. Okay, so the ants go marching number by number hurrah, hurrah. Okay, so the ants go marching. I ended my quotation marks at a plus, number by number, hurrah, hurrah. And I can just create a while loop. I'll say int count assign 0. And I'll say while count is less than 2. Okay, so let me tell you what I did, just so I didn't have to rewrite the code over and over again, and maybe we want to change it in the future. I just create a while loop, and I'll make it go through twice. So the ants go marching one by one, hurrah, hurrah. The ants go marching one by one, hurrah, hurrah. Goes through twice, right? And then call verse. It takes 2 parameters. All right, and then I could make this really long, but I'm not going to. I'm going to go ahead and add this line right here at the end because ants go marching one by one. It'll say it for a third time. Do I want to do this? I might create. Do I want to call that the chorus? I guess I can call that the verse. The little one stops to suck a thumb. All right, just to avoid confusion, here's what I'm going to do. I know I created this while loop, but I don't want to add too much. I'm just going to copy and paste this twice. So check this out. Here's what I did. God bless you. Here's what I did. I got my while loop. I just said, you know what? I'm going to make this the first version. If we want to abstract more detail later, we can. But I don't want to have to write all these classes. It's saying we only have to write one class or one method. Ants go marching one by one, hurrah, hurrah. Ants go marching one by one, hurrah, hurrah. Ants go marching. I guess I could create an ants go marching method. Ants go marching one by one. System.out print line. The little one stops to, and then I'll say rhyme. And then I'll create another method down here. Why it's skipping ahead there. I'll say public void chorus. And inside of the chorus, I don't know why it's skipping ahead so far there. Okay, in here, system.out.println. They all go marching down to the ground. And then I'm copying this, pasting it, putting this inside quotation marks, going back up here and saying to get out of the rain. I'll stop in a second here so you guys can see what I've done. Quotation marks. Okay, so I have the verse, the ants go marching, number by number, hurrah, hurrah. The ants go marching, number by number, hurrah. The little one stops to rhyme. So this is one way of doing it. It's not the only way. I could abstract even more detail and create a marching method that allows me to take the ants go marching and do it over and over and over again too. Okay, we'll pick up here from where we left off tomorrow, and I'll move through the rest of this. All right. I'm going to copy this so I can immediately start where I left off next time. Or I can run it. Maybe that will save it. It will be an error because I never called it. Okay, hopefully that saves it.